Hello, everybody. My name is Geoff Moore. I'm the founder of Pin to Purpose and this podcast, and really happy to have Brendan Tayler as our guest today. For those of you who are, hey, Brendan, for those of you who are not familiar with this initiative, it is a new initiative geared to helping remove stigma around mental health conditions and giving people a hand up on their healing journeys. So, all of the guests that we'll be having, all of the discussions we'll be having, are a reminder to anybody who's struggling right now, that you are just like everybody else in the world. Our common humanity means that we all have tough times. We all have breaking points. We all need a hand up sometimes. So this is intended to share stories and give encouragement that, you never be ashamed or never be, worried about reaching out when you have a challenge. It's we all need that. So without further ado, I want to introduce Brendan. I'm just going to read a brief little bio, and then we're going to start getting into our conversation here. But Brendan Tayler is a former road cyclist and biathlete. Was a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, and now works as a teacher. He's an advocate for suicide prevention and author of Pause, an aid to support people thinking of suicide. He also works as a volunteer coach for the charity Mentality Matters and gives talks locally on mental fitness and other topics like beekeeping and cider making.
Yeah.
So welcome, Brendan.
Oh, thanks, Geoff. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. We've been getting this together for a little while now, and I'm just ready to get started. So thank you so much.
No, that's fantastic. So maybe in addition to that, if you'd like to talk a bit more about your background and gradually moving up towards where this has led you with your writing of the book, but initially talk a bit about your background for our viewers here.
Yeah, that's no problem, Geoff. It's hard to know exactly where to start, other than the fact that I was intending to be a professional athlete whenever I was younger. I was in the elite athlete program in high school, and there was only one other guy. He was a downhill skier, and I was a cross-country skier, which was a pretty it wasn't really very cool to be a cross-country skier. I probably should have played hockey. My dad would have been probably happier with that. My uncle's a professional hockey player, so it just skipped a generation, sadly. When I was going on the skis, and I had a couple of setbacks, and I herniated some discs in my back, and I transitioned over to the bicycle, and I really loved it. It just seemed to suit me so much better, and I really went for it. I had a professional coach. I mean, I had a lot of really great coaches, but I was trying to take the next step, and I moved down south, just outside of Toronto, near Dundas, where my coach lived. And I went to the University of Guelph, and I started putting all of my eggs in one basket. I worked at a bike shop. I was, in a way, I was a kept guy. I had enough to get by. I mean, but it was a hard existence at the start. I spent a lot of time on my bike, and when I wasn't there, I was in this bike shop, and I was working as a doorman in the evenings, which isn't really conducive to a professional athlete working as a bouncer. But it just seemed to fit, and it was about $80 a night, so I couldn't really say no. As a young guy, that was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I thought I had like all my chickens, at well, what's the analogy? Well, all my birthdays had come at once, really. Everything was going great, and I was doing well in all my races, winning some, doing well in others. But I wasn't. I didn't listen. I didn't listen very well. My coach said, "Brendan, you gotta cool it, or you're gonna move up to the last category, and you're really not ready this year to do that." And I didn't listen to him, and I won another race, and I had too many points, and they moved me up, and I went from winning my races to very quickly not even be able to finish them. I was already too tired, and I wasn't ready to move. I should have waited, and I really needed a tempered approach, which is what my coach was trying to do, but I just wasn't ready to listen to him, which was sad. But I lived the very last time I got on my bike, I was in Guelph, living in a boarded room for the summer, and this lady, her name was Marg Wright. She was 78 years old. Her husband had passed away, and she had posted this room available in her home for a quiet student.
And quiet student, is that you? Was that you?
It was definitely not me, right, Geoff? But Marg was brilliant. She said, "Now, don't you think I'm going to be getting you up in the morning and making your breakfast?" But right enough, the first morning I was there, Marg woke me up and she made my breakfast. And pretty soon I was taking her into town for a pack of cigarettes. And she never left the house before I got there. She was sort of, her world had got very small, and maybe mine had too. Margaret saw the degradation. I think what was happening with me. I didn't really see it myself. I wasn't sleeping. I'd overtrained, and I wasn't very well. And eventually, like one night, I ended up on this park bench, drinking a 2-liter bottle of wine at about 3 a.m. And I was wondering, really, what was I doing? Why wasn't my wonderful life happening? Where had it gone? I thought it was going to be much simpler. And I don't think I was really prepared for just how painful the road was going to be. And Marg saw that, and she called my mother and she said, "Linda, I think you better come and pick your son up." And she was right. It was the last time I ever rode my bike, semi-professionally. I didn't ride after that. I packed it in, started going to school again at the University of Laurentian there. And I hated it. And I was really quite depressed. I don't think I really understood what that meant, but I was sleeping on the couch in my basement, like living in the basement and trying to work selling suits and tip-top tailors and thus, I don't know what I was doing. But my best buddy at the time, Jesse was absolute all-star. We were Army cadets together as boys, and we raced together. We did the biathlon in Army cadets. I went on a little bit further and did it in the civilian world, which I loved. But Jesse and I knew each other. And it was a point in my life where I really wasn't sure what I was doing. I just knew that I wasn't very happy. And Jesse said to me, "You'll never guess what I did." We were having a couple of beers in the sauna one night, and I says, "What, Jesse?" He says, "I joined the Army." I says, "You never did." He says, "I did." Well, the next day, I went down to the recruiter in Sudbury, Ontario, and joined myself. I says, "Sign me up for the infantry." And he said, "You really want to go to the infantry?" I says, "Yes, that's what I want. That's it." Jesse was going. He seemed so happy and so clear in his mind what he was doing. That's what I did too. So I went off to the Army, and Jesse and I, Jesse and I, we were fire team partners in battle school. He was in the bunk across from mine. I was doing up his buttons in the morning. He was doing up mine. We were making sure our shit was wired tight and everything was going good. And we had a pretty good thing going. We didn't tell anyone that we knew each other. We just sort of kept it under our hats, Anyway, I knew the Army wasn't for me. I did a tour in Bosnia. And when I was in Bosnia, I met a woman. And when I was here in the UK, I didn't realize it was the end of my Army career, but it was also the end of my life in Canada and my time with Jesse as well, and everyone else. I had to start again. It was very difficult. When I was in the Army, I saw a lot of difficult things, and I don't mean combat related things. I just mean the daily life and times of an infantry soldier in Canada was quite Spartan. It was hard. There was a lot of alcohol involved, like all the time, and it was hard going, I sat on suicide watch for a few of my colleagues as a young guy, and I don't even know what I was meant to really be doing other than watching the person not die while they slept in their bunk. And I saw a lot of disparity, So again, something else I didn't think I would find in the army. I found a lot of that. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of substance abuse. Um, there was a lot of adult life, a lot of real life happening.
Mhm.
Um, if I fast forward a little bit, I moved here, and
Mhm.
I've been here for about 20 years now, and I have a young family, and me and my wife are very, very busy.
Mhm.
That's really the best time of my life. I'm having the best time of my life. But it took a while to get to this place. I noticed the story was not going just as well for a lot of the guys that I served with.
Mhm.
And I think the number is about 17 or 18 now. It keeps changing of the number of guys that I knew that have died by suicide. It was about 10 years ago when I
It's
was home. I know it's not something you would, and I mean, I was in a small regiment of about 500.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of guys that weren't coping very well.
Mhm.
Um, and one of those guys was Jesse. So I was home very briefly my aunt's funeral, and I had heard that Jesse had taken his own life. He had um, driven out to a secluded area and ended his life, and in such a way that he wasn't going to be stopped. It
Right.
was quite hard for me to listen to, and I've seen quite a few people die by suicide, and I've been at the end of a lot of incidents where someone has died by suicide, where I've tried to intervene
Mhm.
and given CPR and
Mhm.
loads of times, and it's been tough, and that's inside the army and outside the army.
Yep.
Um, and I started to teach. It's a 2-day suicide workshop. You might be aware of it. It's called Assist, and
Mhm.
it's actually it hails out of Alberta,
Mhm.
so it's Canadian, which I love.
Mhm. Mhm.
And uh, and I've been teaching it over here, and I taught it, and I taught it, and I taught it, and the more I related it with my own life and that of my friends, and having some insight into their stories and how short they were.
Mhm.
Um, and some of my own thoughts and perspectives and how they've changed and how I've changed in the last 20 years where they haven't had that chance or opportunity to change. The person that I am now at 45 is certainly not the person that I was when I was 20, and definitely not. There's a huge gap. And in that 25 years, there's been so much change. I can only hope that everyone that finds themselves in a low place
Mhm.
gets an opportunity to be helped out of it
Mhm.
so that they can just get that time that they desperately need so that change can happen, you know.
And there's so much you've experienced in your life and with all of your friends and your colleagues, etc. That this is what led you to writing your book, right? And because you have a lot to say, and people will talk about this towards the end of the podcast too. People can access that online and can see it as a reference, etc. But I'm just jumping in here just for a second because we've had some discussions before, and the
Yeah.
reason I'm doing this whole podcast is to bring to light people such as yourselves and others who have a piece of the puzzle, a reference point for people to try to change their own narrative, not be so hard on themselves, be willing to reach out if they're getting stuck. I mean, I've been there myself, having been hospitalized for an extended period of time when things were just completely overwhelming, and my own attempt here, just to add one more reference point and pin to purpose, is just to try to remind people, like, every single person in the world, we're not superhuman. We have breaking points, and you can use this weightlifting metaphor as one way to describe it. There's many ways, but that's one. And it's so, I think, as you say, everybody has a unique situation, but to start with the self-talk and realizing they're not alone, people care about them, and that they're in a weakened state. They're in a tough period, which anybody would be if they were dealing with the heavy, heavy stuff that some people are.
Uh, you make a very good point, Geoff. And a lot of suicide has a lot to do with isolation. And I think isolation is probably the biggest part. And I don't think suicide is the problem. It is the result. Isolation is the problem. Depression is the problem. There's usually a number of problems or a number of things that are happening to a person before suicide starts to become an option for somebody. Mm-hmm. And like my own personal feelings, I don't think are particularly relevant. What I think about suicide and what you think about suicide might be two very, very different things.
Sure, absolutely.
But the point is that irregardless of how we both feel, is that it's still happening. Mm-hmm. It still happens. Mm-hmm. If I wholeheartedly disagree with suicide and I think it's a sin, it's still happening. If I think that, well, it happens and people die by suicide and c'est la vie, it still happens. It's there. It's part of the human condition. It's part of the human condition so much that I think, just off the top of my head, around 8,500 Canadians died last year of suicide. And here in my part of the UK, it's about 202. And that roughly translates to 12.2 per 100,000. If you reference it in India, it's 175,000 souls were lost to suicide in 2023. And I think it's something like 17,000 of those people were under the age of 18. So it is not a North American problem or a European problem. It is a world problem. It is there in every civilization. And I think we all treat it differently. But I think there's a stigma around it. There's a stigma still associated with suicide. That very recently, in say a place like Scotland. Now, please, folks, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't. But generally speaking, I think that it was 1968 was the last year that it was a crime, and suicide was a crime in Scotland. And to commit a crime, to commit suicide, to commit a sin, it's all in the words. And the last thing that somebody that has thoughts of suicide needs is another judgment.
Sure.
They don't need judgments. They don't need my opinion on whether what I think they're doing is right or wrong. In fact, that's the very, very last thing. And there's just so many things that I'd like to say about suicide, and it's a conversation that I have with absolutely everybody that I think needs it, whether they do or they don't. I still try and have it with them. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Other times people actually are surprisingly very open to the conversation and welcome it and have a lot of questions. Not that I am some sort of guru or anything. I just have some insight to it and a little bit of time on the subject and some personal lived experience with this topic, with what is happening with people. And I don't shy away from it because it's one of those things that lives in the shadows. It thrives there. It's when we drag it out into the sunlight that it withers and dies. Mm-hmm. And it's that isolation that somebody can feel in a room full of people. It's not a physical isolation, but it is an isolation of sorts, and it manifests itself in all kinds of ways. And it's individual and it's unique to each individual. So whenever I came to this point, roughly around 40 years old, I started feeling that I think I actually have something that I want to say about this. Something that I think, now that my hair is a bit gray, and I think there's something I can give back. Surely all of the things that I've seen and all of the things that I know must be of value to someone. Mm-hmm. I must hang my hat here somewhere and see if somebody else could benefit from it somehow. And if it saves a life, that's all I want. It's not about me. I really don't care if you know my name or not. It is about this topic, and it is about someone that's listening not dying by suicide. Mm-hmm. If it's for today, tomorrow, maybe they only revisit it one time, Geoff. That's it. Maybe they come back to it over and over again. I don't know, right? But my good friend Bashkar Goswami that I met on a plane 25 years ago. Just he was heading one way, I was heading another. We had a seat next to each other, and I don't know what it was, man. It was just two chatty Cathys. We had a connection, and 25 years later, that man quietly sits in the background.
He's a great man.
Just I don't know what he doesn't say go and do that. He doesn't say don't do it. He just says, Brendan, you made this thing. You should finish that. It would be rude not to finish that. I started working with this group. Bashkar put me in touch with this really lovely guy called Richie Sherratt, in Mentality Matters, and amazing things can happen over long distances. Excuse me. And Richie said, what can you do for guys that are leaving the army? What can you do for people that are trying to reintegrate back into civilian life? What can you do for men that are struggling, and not even in the army, just men, just men today in 2025? Well, what can you do? And I said, well, I can maybe talk about anxiety. I can maybe talk about anger. Both of those things I feel in great quantities, right? And what do I do with those? And I started to structure some things that I thought were useful about it. Not that I'm a doctor or anything like that, but in a way that maybe people could understand why they were feeling the way they were feeling. And then that gained some self-awareness, if only that, right? And the topic for suicide came up. And I thought, right, well, I definitely have something to say about this. And so I did basically what I'm doing right now, Geoff, is I just hit the play button and I started to talk. And it was about 15 minutes long. And I didn't know what to do with it. I said, Bashkar, listen to that. What does that sound like? Well, what should we do that? And then he put it to text and he sent it back. And he said, Brendan, that's something that someone needs to see. And I think you need to finish that. And again, I did. So I got put in touch, and Bashkar helped me again with this wonderful person, Lauren Deckelbaum, her name is. She's a psychologist and also conveniently an editor. And so we work together, just because I am not a doctor or a psychologist or clinical anything. I'm just some schmo, right? But she helped me think, well, Brendan, are you considering maybe people with depression here? And maybe this sentence isn't quite right. And so there was a little bit of clinical assistance, right? And I needed that. And what it finished off like was something not very long. It's like 3,200 words. It's not a book. It's a booklet. What I always wanted was to just be something that could fit in someone's pocket. They could find it on the corner of a shelf somewhere at a coffee shop, on top of a toilet in the restroom. I don't care where you find it. You just that you do find it. And it's very simple. It's innocuous. It doesn't even have a title. The first page just says, this book is about suicide, but don't put it down too quickly because it's also about life. Right? And then someone was right. Well, I wonder what this is going to say. And it's short. It's just, there's only text on a few paragraphs on each page. And then there's a spot at the end where you can write down some thoughts and feelings that you're having. And sometimes it does help to order your thoughts and put them down on paper and read them back. And maybe they look at it. Maybe they don't need it themselves. It does two things in my mind. If someone's thinking of suicide, it can help that person. If someone's not thinking of suicide, maybe it helps someone that's working with someone who is a family member or a friend, Geoff,
Right. And the important thing, as you said, and it's also about life. And I think at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, right? How do people get out of that ideation? How do they get back to, and a purpose or something that's key that they can focus on going forward and not feel alone, feel part of community or part of a team or engaging again, getting through those tough times.
It's just everyone. It's just like Pin to Purpose. Everyone's going to need some help at some time. We've watched the wrong role models. We've been following the wrong tough guys around, and we never see how the tough guy's story really finishes. You only watch them for an hour and a half on the TV or a movie or whatever, and you don't really see what's happening there. Once I realized the tough guy wasn't serving me anymore, I abandoned him. That's it. Sorry, this is fruitless, and it's really quite damaging for me and for everyone around me as well. Um, and it just took me a bit of time to realize that. And people, other people, Geoff, you, Bashgar, people, hey, have you ever heard of this guy? Have you heard of Alan Watts? Oh my God, like what? I'm like, Alan who? Alan Watts is like in my brain all the time now. I can't stop listening to Alan. I love his voice, man. If you were like restless, like Alan to help you go to sleep just by listening to him. And there was other guys, Sadhguru. I listened to Sadhguru for a while, and he opened my mind to like Eastern philosophy and Buddhism and all kinds of stuff. Not that I'm a Buddhist. I'm not really in anything. I just, it just opened me up to something else. This massive shift, and from old thinking that just wasn't serving me anymore into something else, right? And that's exactly what this little booklet is trying to do. Is it shifting somebody's gaze, which is locked firmly, a spotlight locked in the past on things that have happened, and that's where they are, and it just brings them back into their body, or it's trying to bring them back into their body so that they can maybe think about what's happening in this one moment here. And if you can just do that, that is really doing something, right? And I don't want to you just go and read it. And if you can't read it, say you can't read, or you don't have the capacity, or like I can't read through all that text, it's pages, I can't do that, then I have done an audio version of it, which I have to say was harder. It was harder than it started off as audio, then went back to text, and then it went back to audio. It was harder to put it back into audio. So I hope it translates okay.
I'm going to put the link afterwards related to this podcast, but I wonder if you want to mention what it is too verbally, or we'll just put it afterwards.
Yeah. It's Pause for Suicide, all one word, isn't like hit the pause button. pauseforsuicide.com. That's it. Yeah. It's okay. I was sick of red tape and bureaucracy and people being signposted to resources and all this stuff. There's no humanity in that. And when the person actually does find the resource, it may be wonderful, but this is for a lot of people aren't going to speak to anybody, and if you're not going to speak to anybody, you probably have a mobile phone in your hand and you're going to Google the word suicide, or you're going to like, I need help, I'm thinking of suicide. So if you have this phone in your hand, pauseforsuicide.com takes you there. You can read something, you can listen to something. You'll hear my voice for 23 minutes, and maybe, God forbid, you might actually hate the sound of it, or it might be like, chalk on fingernails on a chalkboard. But, maybe you get to the end of it and you're like, okay, maybe I feel a little bit better, or maybe I want to hear that again, or.
I want to ask you, because I'd like to ask people on each podcast about this, but let's talk about stigma, and let's talk about the things that are holding people back, especially men, and let's talk about ways to get around that. And that's, again, I have one attempt here, which is just, trying to use the bench press metaphor and trying to say we're all the same. Ultimately, we're all, there's no shame. I mean, and, you don't have to tell the world, but you shouldn't feel that you can't speak to, somebody that in your family, your best friend, your doctor, whoever, right? But anyway, I'd like to talk a bit about that, or get some of your thoughts, because stigma is still a very big deal.
I think you use the key word, which is shame, right? We live under a great big umbrella of shame and Western culture, and shame is one of those things that's gonna tie your hands behind your back. It may not kill you when you're younger, and it may not kill you when things are going okay. So we're all ashamed. I'm ashamed to be naked in public. Like, why am I ashamed to be naked in public? Well, because my mother always said, Brendan, you can't do that. You can't run around naked. So I have these feelings of shame that have been like ground into you, and like they become part of your, your character and your persona and your ego and everything. Really, there's no problem walking around naked. It doesn't really hurt anybody, but when it comes to something like suicide, and you have the same set of parameters, and I feel ashamed that I'm weak, That must be weak because that's what I was told. Suicide is a bad thing. It's almost a sin. I was, born and raised in a certain religion that made me feel like that, and living under all that shame. Um, Ultimately, I think could kill somebody when it comes to suicide because it stops them from taking that much needed leap. That's just that little hand forward to help. Geoff, if I needed you, I would ask for you, but only because I've seen what happens when you don't, and I know that my life has some meaning. It has the most meaning. There's nothing that means more than it. Your life is the same. It is all that matters. It really is, and I want to make sure that someone is maximized to reach out, and it's if you can get past the that stigma and the shame that's been ground into you, it is very brave. It is very brave, and the most difficult moment will be in the asking. That's the most difficult moment, and if you can get to it, then everything is possible after that point. And I think the only way we can reduce that shame and that stigma, right, is by talking and talking and normalizing in a way that where it can be normalized. That suicide is a part of us in a way that everything else is. It is not good and it is not bad. It is just there, and that's it. It's there. So you can ignore it if you want, but it will not make it any less real. And you can ignore oxygen too. Like it doesn't make it any less real. You're still breathing, right? And I think you're right. The shame is the thing, and everyone will get to a point where if they have no resilience, they're just tough. They're stubborn, and they have a lot of momentum, and they're moving. They just get to a point where something breaks off, where they can't continue, and that's not resilience. You've been lucky, and that's why the tough person, the person that's like, oh my God, I can't believe that, he was so happy, he was always so this, he was always so that. No, he wasn't. He just had enough momentum that brought him to where he was, and then a part fell off, and he couldn't continue anymore. And when it happened, he didn't have the resources and the understanding to reach out, to realize, Jesus, I'm drowning here. I really need help. And because we don't get any, you don't get any positive feedback for showing any kind of need for assistance. It's a weakness, Either you're showing strength or you're not. You're useless or something,
I think the framing, and again, as you say, more and more discussions. It's really the core of what this whole podcast is about, and bringing on different people with different experiences, different solutions who've gone through things. But at the end of the day, the framing, we've talked about my 105-year-old relative, Alf Moore, who, if you see the website, you see the details. But for people listening here, they may not have seen that. But, for him, at 105, he had a routine to wake up every day, and he'd look in the mirror at the beginning of his day and go, oh, good, you're still here. And then he'd say, happy birthday, Alf, every single day. So, he celebrated 87 more birthdays after I last met him. And he wrote his own obituary, which was full of gratitude and thankfulness to friends and family, etc. But why I'm saying that is, I think that the assumption that this framework of weakness has to stay forever, or is the only way to think about it, is completely wrong. And what you're trying to do, what others are trying to do, what I'm trying to do, what tons of people are trying to do, is to try to focus on, scrap that, because there's no obligation to have that view. It's a view, but it is not the only view. And at the end of the day, people are dealing with very heavy things. And again, when people realize what they're dealing with, they're not weak. They're in a weakened state, and they deserve the hand up. So I hope the battle, through your booklet, through what lots of people and organizations are trying to do, continues to change that narrative, and give people a bit of a hand up, and lighten the load, so that they can get back on a healing journey of their own. Because it's unique. Everybody's life, absolutely, as you're saying, is unique to them. But it's we need to change that narrative.
We do. It's not something that you should ever have to keep in on your own. And we need a network. We need a network of people around us. And if we don't have one, we have to establish one. And we need to do it when we're young. We need to teach young people that it's not if there's going to be a problem, it's when there's going to be a problem.
That's right.
And what are you going to do when, like a young athlete, I got a knee injury. Oh my God, it was like the end of my life. I felt so shit and I couldn't cycle. I couldn't do any sports. And my mental health got very bad for about 6 months. But as my knee got better, so dideth my mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a temporary thing, but it was all I could focus on. It was all I could think about, how I was getting behind, how I wasn't going to make the next season, how I was going to, be just not going to make it, going to be worthless. Why is a person, why do they think that if they have a problem with their knee, that their life doesn't have any meaning or that it's over? Like,
That's it.
What could program somebody to feel like that? Well, I can tell you who it is. It's everyone around you. It's just the way we do it. Like we where there's strength, everyone, gravitates towards strength. They don't gravitate towards someone that's not strong. But that's bullshit. It's not right. And athletes go to very dark places. They do. In fact, it's actually called the dark place, man. I was in the fucking dark place for 2 months last year. I had a problem with my back or whatever, and athletes will talk about it, but they don't really express how they were able to get out of it very well. It just seems to miraculously happen. Mm. I can tell you that at 40 years old, to the point where I got about 45, I realized that if I did not actively cultivate my mental well-being, I was not going to have it any longer. Mm. And that was like reaching out to friends, connecting with people, researching, learning, finding other resources,
yep.
Realizing that I was quite mortal and that I needed to address those things, mm-hmm. and then say the right words to myself, not going, Brennan, what the, you piece of shit, how come you couldn't make that race, or how come why was this late, or why did you screw that up? Or you have to.
Self-talk is huge, right? It continues weighing people down or keeping them in these dark places. And as you say, I guess that's part of speaking to people and getting fresh opinions, fresh air being, going out into nature, right? I'm looking out the window here and there's some nature there. It's like, it's a piece of the puzzle always.
Geoff, I was furiously weeding out a bed behind my house. My mother-in-law, she doesn't garden so much anymore. And there was all this stuff to do. So I'm on my knees and I'm weeding out this bed, and I thought to myself, am I a gardener? I think maybe I am, And I just was like, I'm just going to embrace this, man. And every night I went out and I weeded and I gardened and I started learning, and I ended up planting an apple orchard there. My midlife crisis was an apple orchard. Not Harley Davidson, but an apple orchard. Now I run around with my kids. We play hide and seek in it, and they help me prune the trees, and we collect the apples, and we make cider and stuff. But that connection, I was near enough in tears one day walking around those silly, thinking, this is so silly. I'm just walking around some trees. Why do I feel? I didn't realize what I was making for myself was a path to well-being. I had created it inadvertently, accidentally, or whatever, or subconsciously created this thing that I was going to really hang on to keep myself well. And it's seasonal. I watch the seasons like a hawk. I look at I know the buds are outside. They're fattening right now on the trees. I know there's going to be blossoms this year, and I'm thinking about what's the apple crop going to be like. And I really got myself back in touch with really what I am, that I didn't arrive on this planet. I actually came out of it, and it was when I got back to nature and started looking at things like that, and I stopped thinking about, this tough guy bullshit persona that I was pursuing fruitlessly, by the way, 100% fruitlessly. And I started putting my energy and efforts towards cultivating my own well-being, that it actually started to happen. I wasn't feeling so anxious anymore. I didn't have butterflies in my tummy. I was able to go into town and walk around and not feel bad. Comfortable in my own skin, and it just started to happen very slowly. Um, but it never happens on your own. You have to have help, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gotta have help,
Yeah.
brother.
No. Well, this has been,
About Pin to Purpose, I keep jumping on. That's what I love about Pin to Purpose, because it's true, man. Like, how many times have you been to the gym and you see a guy and he's pumping iron, and then he's just can't get off. And then someone comes with their little finger and they just touch it and up it goes. Up it goes, right?
That's what we need. We all need that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame. The guy at that point has worked extremely hard. We're all battling, but when at a certain point we can only battle so much. So absolutely. It's and it's wonderful to hear what you're saying and sharing your story and writing your booklet and bringing this forward, because it's important we're two grown men talking here, to talk to other grown men. I'm not ashamed to say I was hospitalized for a long time. It took me a long time to recover. I got pinned. That's okay. I'm grateful.
But you're not pinned now, right?
I'm not pinned now. And we if we stay with other people, we're all in various degrees getting pinned every day. I mean, it is, life is challenging, but to get really pinned and to have the mental health challenges of all types that people have, there's never any shame, to talk. You don't have to tell the world, but you should not take it all on your own.
And the guilt as well that goes along with the shame too. It's a horrible cocktail. Those two babies, they come in pairs, guilt and shame together. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful cocktail working against somebody, especially when they're at their, a slightly weakened state, like they're not maybe thinking very clearly or whatever, and they've been ruminating on their own thoughts over and over and over. Mm-hmm. It's just, I was just from some of what I've been learning, and thinking over this last few years. The conscious mind is a really wonderful tool. It is so great at problem solving. It's so great at dissection and cutting things apart. Like if there's a gazelle running across the plains and I've got a bow and arrow, I know that I have to have a certain draw and a certain lead in order to get that baby so that I can have food for my family tonight. The conscious mind is doing all of that. It's working out all of those things, and it's great at it. It's really, really wonderful. And that conscious mind is like a sharp knife. It cuts things in pieces, right? This is not my idea. This is an idea. That's a lot of people like this idea. I like it too, right? It's when the conscious mind and the handle on the mind. Okay, so the handle of the knife is what you're identifying with. So if I'm identifying with suicide right now, and I've got this really wonderful mind that's so sharp, and it's working on this idea of suicide, and it's working on it for a long period of time, it's clever. It's going to cut it apart into so many pieces that it can figure out a way that it can justify it or make it happen, or, it's what you're identifying with is what really needs to change. And whenever you take that sharp object and you turn it towards yourself and it starts cutting you, it's very, very hard to stop that once it happens, on your own. On your own.
Yeah, it can't be on your own. Absolutely. No.
It's tough, and maybe that explanation works for some people. Maybe it doesn't. Well, when I heard it, I started to wonder what it was I was identifying with. What makes me me? Why? What do I value? And do those things work for me? Or are they still serving me? And if they're not, maybe I need to set them down.
Absolutely.
Nobody thinks the bouncer's going to go home and cry. Nobody thinks that. Nobody thinks that. They just think he's stands there like this.
It's important to know.
That's what they think. But that guy probably reads poetry, man.
Well, listen, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention here as we wrap up, but I think
there is. I know. I'm sorry, man. I'm a chatty Cathy.
No, it's all good. This is what it's all about.
You're not alone, right? There's very few people that really are alone. I mean, Tom Hanks's character on Castaway, okay, he was alone, all right? He had Wilson. He had the volleyball. Very few people are that. None of us are truly alone, right? There's somebody within a mile of you, I'm sure, right now. It's just remember the brave feelings that it takes to think about suicide, because I think it does take a lot of brave feelings to think about suicide. It also takes a lot of brave feelings to think about life, and you are worth it.
Yes.
Please reach out to somebody, reach out and revisit this idea of life. It is so incredibly important. We have been given the gift of time. It is the ultimate currency. It's what means more than anything else. Please, my 20-year-old self, if I could have 5 minutes with you, what I would say, and what I would say to my friend Jesse, and what I would say to all my other mates that aren't here, what I would say to them would be just please reach out, please talk to somebody. That will be the most difficult moment, and once you do, things will start to get a little bit better that day for you. That's what I have to say, Geoff.
Yep. Thank you, Brendan. And just to finalize it, I mean, I should put it up on the site too. There are helplines always 24/7 across Canada, across so many countries, and so in addition to that, that's you are never alone.
You are never alone.
Yeah,
you're right. And please come and check out if you're a man and you're looking for a way to get involved, come check out Mentality Matters. You can go on the web. We do coaching sessions online. We do chats online. There's going to be some meetups and stuff if you live in the New York area, which I don't. So my life with them is all online. But there's groups in your area. There's a lot there. I mean, you have to find the one that works for you. Please come and find us. And Geoff, thank you so much. And thank you for your gift of Pin to Purpose. And I'm really so honored that you've had me on here and you're making me a part of your vision, mate. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Brendan. Thanks for everything you're doing. We're all in this together. Nobody is alone, and nobody's weak. There's better days ahead. So take care, my friend.
Thanks, brother. Thank you.